Can you guys hear me in
Yeah,
chat? I
it
try not
was.
to look at
I'm
chat too much.
I'm just a boomer.
Oh, you're okay. I'm a boomer too. But so yeah, I do true crime on Twitch. I've been doing it, I would say, for about 5 or 6 years. I don't know if you know this, Dr. K, but it started with like I would just play League, and after I lost like 3 or 4 rounds, I'd be like, "Do you guys want to tell like hear a murder story?" And my chat would be like, "I guess." I would just tell them some crazy story that stuck with me that week. And then sometime in the last 2 years, I just started doing true crime full time on Twitch. Like it's all we do now. And I find that most violent acts, I mean, murder overall, because that's what we talk about a lot in true crime, it comes from like repressed trauma and unregulated emotion that, like, if they just knew that this is how they handled things with violence or hitting a boiling point, this would have never happened.
Hmm.
And so I dive a lot into people's stories and like what happened to them. I don't know, I think that's pretty interesting. I'm also a person that I think I got diagnosed with PTSD like 3 years ago or so, and
Hmm.
I think that's so interesting. Um, I feel like all too often people think that PTSD is for like war veterans or, people that have been through a lot of crazy stuff. And sometimes we devalue our trauma and how much things hurt us. And we're like, I don't have PTSD. It wasn't that bad. I'm okay. But you don't realize you're living in this memory or these moments over and over and over again. And it's affecting you. Anyways, that's a whole bunch of stuff. You pick. You tell me where we're
Yeah, so
going.
so I love it all. So I think we're gonna kind of meander for a while, and just to kind of lay a couple boundaries or clarify or reinforce a couple boundaries. So while we may be talking about the link between trauma and crime, while you may be sharing some of your experiences around sort of the process of being diagnosed and maybe what your life is like. We're not going to dive into the details of your trauma. We're not going to diagnose you. We're not going to treat you or anything like that, right? Is that clear, fair?
Yeah, that's great,
Yeah.
but it's definitely PTSD. Like it's
Yeah.
bad.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I think part of what we try to do here on this channel is have people share their experiences of living in the world, whatever that may be. And sometimes
Yeah.
that involves a diagnosis, sometimes it doesn't. But we'd really love to just learn about you and kind of what you have to offer, what you want to share. So why don't we start with just like, so it sounds like you've become quite adept at understanding true crime, talking about true crime. Can you just tell us a little bit about that and what you've learned about, true crime and the link with trauma?
Oh, yeah, man, there's so much there. It's like where to start, right? Have you ever heard of those cases before where somebody commits a crime, they kill somebody, and people say, I never saw him like that. He was so quiet. How could
Sure.
this have happened? Such a good boy. Um, you know, Sometimes I see cases, and I can't believe there's so many at this point where we have like a really quiet guy or girl, and they have a parent that's constantly berating them, like a super, super narcissistic parent that is always, me, like devaluing your emotions, invalidating every single thing, and really training that person to not speak up, to not fight for themselves, to bully them into submission. Well, then that person has all this repressed and just stored anger that is never validated, never expressed because you have to express that. And then they end up going to the most primal form of expressing that anger, which is violence. And they didn't have a parent that gave them the tools to look at other options. And it's like truly with this stuff, the first step is identifying how do you handle anger? How do you handle being overwhelmed? Because every human experiences that. You want to be prepared for those emotions that are coming up. And if you don't know where they are in your body, if you're in denial that you're angry, if you're in denial that you've been hurt because other people denied that you were hurting, um, then you're not even going to be able to feel that emotion and figure out what to do next in a healthy way, right? So many cases, that's just the bottom line. They don't know the emotion, they feel it, it wells up, they go to the most primal instinct, and it's destroy the thing that's hurting me. And I see that a lot in true crime. I see, I don't know, do you have thoughts on that? I can keep going for
Yeah,
years.
keep going. I'm taking
Um,
notes.
One that I haven't talked about too much is a really heavy connection with like mass shootings and public humiliation. Like a lot of these people have an interesting story of public humiliation where a lot of people watched something bad happen to them and they have this misanthropy, they have this retribution on humankind. If you've seriously look up the connection between like public humiliation and what it does to the brain, that's a really big one. What?
Interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Um, when a lot of times, vengeance is a common theme in repressed anger. Revenge fantasies, that's also like another one of the baseline ones because when one person or a lot of people hurt you at once, um, what are you supposed to do? You know, like what are you supposed to do? And this takes it takes a lot of really unique tools to work through mass humiliation, which I find fascinating. You know, back in the day, a lot of these people, they might have been humiliated by a parent. I see all the time. Embarrassment is something that we kind of do to ourselves or happens, but humiliation is done to you. And you get very upset at this one person, but then you also get upset at this mass body of people. And then we don't give that child any tools for working through that. In fact, usually the humiliator is a parent and they don't want to deal with what they did to you, so they deny it, right? So we have this denial of what happened, this denial of your pain, and it turns into I'm going to show everyone how bad that I'm hurting and everyone's going to pay. And that is one of the most common themes I see in mass shootings, but I am on my channel. I never talk about mass shootings. I don't talk about these people because if you kill for attention, especially when these people write their stupid fucking manifestos, I will pay you no mind. I'll kind of study the story like on the side, but I don't give it any type of platform like on my channel.
Yeah, I know that there's, you know, evidence of like things like suicide clusters. This was like a lot of this research was originally done in Japan, where media glorification of violent acts tends to lead to violent acts. I wonder if that's part of what we're seeing in the United States, where
Absolutely. Back in the 70s, they were doing interviews of serial killers, giving them scary names, giving them scary headlines. And it teaches all of these people, hey, if you're in pain and you have violent tendencies, but you feel like you're a nobody, you can be a somebody if you go do something really, really bad. I have said this so many times, the way that New Zealand treated the Christchurch shooting, which horrific. The next level, like I can't even the way that they treated it was afterwards, they banned the guy's name from media. They blurred his face on everything, and he's just been in the hole for years. They've wiped everything off of the internet, and there's no mention of him. But here in America, we're like, the so-and-so shooter, here's the next, because the articles get clicks, and they just keep doing it, and it drives me nuts. So that's why on my channel, and I know some people probably have different opinions about this, but instead of glorifying those people and talking about how scary they are, I tell them that they're dumb fucks and they're pieces of shit. Because, like, why are we giving them scary names? Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I know. So I'm hearing that there's this kind of idea that people become nobodies and that they want to be somebodies. I wonder if that kind of ties into humiliation and public humiliation. Can you tell us like just stories of, I'm kind of curious, like when you say public humiliation, like what kind of stuff are you talking about?
I've got to be honest, it's difficult for me, like a story pops up into my head, but I am always hesitant to humanize some of these people, even if I do know their stories. But I mean, the baseline of one is just like a parent that humiliates their child to show who's in control. And it happens over and over and over again. That's like a type. But I also find it interesting now that we're dealing with public humiliation on a mass scale through social media, and we have no idea how that's affecting people.
That's really interesting. So what I'm kind of hearing you say is that in your kind of observations of true crime, there's a difference between even one-on-one humiliation or one-on-one invalidation, bullying, whatever. And then this idea of humiliation, I think almost implies public, right? It implies on a mass scale. To be humiliated is to be like your identity or who you are has become devalued almost like globally.
Yes. And then, you've probably seen this a lot in trauma. People will repeat their trauma over and over and over again until they can take it back in another way. And sometimes in these scenarios, these people are like, well, I'm going to show you how much pain I'm in, and I'm in control now, and I'm in control of all of you.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about that principle, Boze?
Huh. This is more, I would need a more specific question.
Sure. So I mean, okay, let's talk about something else for a second. Maybe we can get back to it. So another major theme that you've talked about is kind of the denial of anger, either denial of anger by others or denial of anger for yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. God, this comes in so many different forms. Everyone gets angry about something at some point. Maybe it's something that happened in school. Maybe it's something that a parent did to you. And let's say you go to your parent. Well, if the parent did that thing, they're just going to downplay it, They don't want to feel bad about any of that. And now let's say something happened to you in school. You go to the parent again, and the parent, maybe they had bad things happen to them in school, so they don't feel any empathy for you. And then maybe also they just don't care. Or maybe they're on drugs. Like there's so many ways that denial of a child's emotions can happen. And they're kind of expected to just keep going. You know what? I have a personal example of this. When I was a kid, I was raised in a very, very religious home, and I had a lot of religious trauma around when something bad would happen to me, and I would go to my parents and my grandparents. They would tell me to go to God or to pray, and then they would tell me they would pray for me or something. And so in my household, it was always God first, maybe me second. And putting a kid on the back burner like that so much and just telling them, oh, pray it away, it'll be okay, is a complete denial of things. And to an extent, I feel like I have gratitude for it because I do think it created some resilience in me. But overall, it was not the best course of action. But a lot of kids get that kind of treatment.
And so when you were kind of and let me know if things get too personal, but so what impact did that have on you to sort of be told to, hey, pray it away?
It made me feel like for my entire life that I didn't matter and that my needs didn't matter, because every time I expressed my needs clearly, and my God, some people aren't able to express their needs clearly, but when I did, they were not met. And so when that happens over and over and over, a child rationalizes with the best tools that they have available in this world. And it kind of works backwards to this point of, well, it happened again. It happened again. Well, I must not matter, so I should stop. And that really is something that manifested into my teens and my 20s. And I lived my life through that lens for a long time, reinforcing that narrative. And then you turn 30 and you have to undo it. And it's a lot of work. And quite often, you can't do that work alone, because when the world has defined you in such a way and you believe it, you can't undo that on your own.
Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that kind of frightens me. I've been doing more and more research on the mental health crisis, for lack of a better term.
It is a crisis.
And, one of the things that I think I'm starting to really appreciate that we sort of made a fundamental mistake in the way that we view the human mind. So in medicine, we think about illness as existing within you, right? So like if I've got a kidney problem, like it's a problem in my kidney. If I've got heart, let's say high blood pressure, hypertension, that's a problem in my blood vessels. So we sort of think about illness as something that exists within you. And then what we did in psychiatry is we sort of said the same thing, right? We're like, okay, so you can have a problem with your heart, you can have a problem with your liver, you can have a problem with your GI system, you can have a problem with your brain. That's neurology. You can have a problem with your mind. That's psychiatry. But I think the more that we're learning, I think the more I'm realizing that a healthy mind does not exist simply within one body. A healthy mind is really built through relationships. And if we sort of look at humanity, like we're kind of tribal, right? So a lot of our mental well-being comes from outside of us.
Yes,
And one of the
we're
most
social creatures.
absolutely. And one of the most devastating things is that even when I make kind of content, right, where people are like, how do I fix this? The really scary thing is that I'm not sure that the way that problems are fixed can solely be done by you. And in fact, I wonder if we've actually done people a huge disservice by telling them, hey, if you are mentally ill, this is something for you to fix. Because then what happens is it sort of places the responsibility on them. And I think everyone has some degree of responsibility. But then if you fall short, then it becomes your fault again, which can then, repeat the cycle. So
and push the narrative that you believe even further into you.
Right, which is that you're to blame.
Yes.
And so it's really interesting, but I think a lot of what we're seeing, and we're sort of seeing epidemiologic data as well, that as human beings become disconnected, mental problems get worse. And the real challenge there, and I think what's really kind of paralyzing and devastating about this is that I don't know that people themselves can fix everything on their own. And what I'm really starting to really wonder about is how can we encourage society as a whole or other people to be responsible for your mental health? Because I think that's really what it takes. And a big part of therapy, I think a big part of the value of therapy is that you have another human being who's saying, okay, your mental well-being is now actually partially my responsibility too. And that's, I think, half the therapeutic value of seeing a therapist is that you've got someone else who's like, hey, like I'm supposed to help you with this. This isn't all on you.
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's hard for some people to find those friendships too, especially now in social media when everyone's preaching like, oh, that's his problem, or you go fix yourself. I don't have the energy for this or anything. I am a firm believer that, as you expand your friend group or maybe you're close with people in your family, take on 3 or 4 people that you're going to dedicate yourself to caring about. Like truly. And it can go as simple as like really understanding a friend. If you have a friend that had a long history of neglect, like just responding to their text messages now and then, or even giving them an update like, hey, I'm super busy right now, but I'd love to chat with you later. Or a person that is very like touch starved or never was told like, I love you, give them a hug, tell them I love you. Know how those 4 people operate, and just a couple friends can really, really heal somebody. I love telling my friends I love them so much because those emotionally detached bitches need it so bad. Also, I'm so sorry for cursing. I apologize.
We're on Twitch. I think it's fair game.
Okay.
So that's really great. I really like your kind of guide to being a good friend. So it is respond to texts, or even give them a heads up if you're not responding.
Yes.
Give them a hug. And
yeah.
What were the other things? What do you think makes a good friend? How do we be good friends today?
How do we be good friends? I love that. Well, one, understand your friend. That's the first thing. Really listen. And not only don't understand, don't be scared, okay? Like, plan to tackle this friendship fearlessly. The interesting thing is your really traumatized friends, they will tell you exactly what their biggest trauma is. People that are super traumatized, they just like dump it, they trauma dump it. And oh man, a tool that we're not given enough is telling that person. So often when somebody tells you something really bad, you just want to be like, I'm sorry that happened, and change the subject or something, or it's like these surface level things. I'm trying to think of some specific ones. When somebody tells you something really traumatic or something really, really bad that happened, you should say something like, I bet in that moment you were really scared. Or I bet in that moment you felt extremely betrayed. And a lot of times that person doesn't feel as alone in that pain anymore. That's what trauma feels like. You feel like you're alone in this emotion, in this bubble that no one can understand. And if one person can just articulate like, oh my God, it must have been so horrible that they ignored you like that, the other person finally feels validated for the first time. And they say, oh my God, yeah, that was messed up. And it's so much better than I'm so sorry that happened. Like that almost does nothing for that person. So I think listening to them, understanding what they're hurt by, repeating it back to them, and then being there for them and continuing to listen and repeat stuff back to them as you listen. That is one of the biggest healing things that you can do for people. And then from there, as you're able to identify where their pain lies, because when you repeat it back, you say, I'm sorry you were betrayed. I'm sorry you were ignored. You're saying exactly where that hurt is, right? And if you can find a part of yourself that can nourish that, like don't stab them in the back and make sure they know that you're going to take care of them. Listen to them if they were always misunderstood, like as a kid, or pay attention to them when you can if they were always neglected. Like, and just it's okay to give a little piece of yourself to people that you care about. Like it's okay. Like we don't all have to be selfish all the time.
Yeah, it sounds like you're an amazing friend, Boze.
I'm an annoying friend. I call my friends all the time. Another big thing that I have is that I wish more people did is like when you're in like your teens or your 20s, you should make an effort to connect with people that you like. Like text them randomly, call them, build a relationship because when you're in your 30s, you're going to be so happy you have that friend. I have a group of like, I would say, dude, I have like 7 best friends or something. And these are relationships that I've built up over like 7 or 10 years by putting in the effort, by being there for them and also communicating with them and showing them that I care about them and not taking it personally if they don't pick up the phone or answer a text. I'll just keep coming back.
It sounds wonderful. It sounds like you've built some really nice friendships that really sustain you and that you've sustained other people over the last decade or so. Do you have a sense of how you got started with that? Right. So I can understand that like you're talking about, 7 to 10 years, but a lot of people nowadays just have struggle to get started.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of them were internet friendships, almost all of them, every
Wow.
single one. And I'm a pretty emotionally detached person, or I was a lot in my 20s. And so I would often connect with other emotionally detached people. And so the internet was like our barrier where we didn't get too close. But over time, by like always talking, we wanted to be closer to each other. And then the best way to describe it was I never let moments of discomfort ruin an entire friendship. I see those as an opportunity to make the friendship even stronger. And I don't know. I feel like I'm so all over the place in this. I can just,
No.
nobody asks me this stuff, Dr. K, and I love talking about it.
No, that's great. So let's. Is it okay if we talk about like friendships and relationships for a minute?
Mm-hmm.
So, in those moments of discomfort, our natural inclination is to like retreat from them, right? Because we don't like being uncomfortable. And how do you manage those moments of discomfort?
When I feel uncomfortable, I used to just be like, shut it down. I'm going to turn this other way. And instead, what I do is I tell myself that I'm uncomfortable. I try to feel it in my body and become okay with feeling uncomfortable because that just happens. And I think about what I want and what I want at the end of this. So like if my friend and I are having a disagreement and it makes me uncomfortable, I let it happen. I feel it and I say like, do I want to continue a friendship with this person? If the answer is yes, it's how do I do that? You know? And chances are that person is also feeling uncomfortable too. And if 2 people are uncomfortable, you're both going to run away. But if one of you can fight for the friendship, it shows the other person how much you care about them. And if you can work through it, it really builds something. And that's also how you get these unbreakable friendships. That's really important.
Yeah. Can I just process that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it, by the way. I think it's brilliant. Okay. So here's what I love about that. So if we kind of look at it, we have 2 kinds of relationships. The relationships where there are going to be moments of discomfort and relationships where there aren't going to be moments of discomfort. The wall of the internet. And if you have a relationship with someone where there's a wall between you, it's always going to stay shallow because it's getting through those moments of discomfort that allows you to deepen a relationship. So I see a lot of people have this problem where it's like all of my relationships feel shallow. So what can you do about that? That's the tricky thing, is that you're going to have these moments of discomfort, and the very things that give you the opportunity to deepen the relationship, you feel uncomfortable, they feel uncomfortable, and both of y'all want to retreat. So in order to get through that, I think you've laid it out really well. So the first thing is to acknowledge and be aware of the fact that you are uncomfortable. So oftentimes discomfort, we just react to it or we're controlled by it. We don't even realize that it's happening. The discomfort makes us think about leaving. So all we're focused on is leaving. We don't even realize, okay, why do I want to leave in the first place? Because I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And even going back to what you were saying earlier, if we think about what helps people with their emotions, validating their emotions helps. Naming the emotion helps, right? So in that moment, if you say to yourself, I'm uncomfortable, what you're actually doing is naming the emotion, validating the emotion, and supporting yourself through it.
Yeah. And if you're a person that had a parent that either didn't validate your emotions because they didn't want to, or honestly, some of parents didn't know how to validate their own emotions because they weren't taught to, right? So now you're a human being that has never been validated before. You don't know how to. You don't even feel like you're worthy of validating your emotions. That's fucking hard. That's hard. And I try to tell people all the time, like, you are a human. You are going to have emotions. And you need to figure out your top 3 emotions that you have all the time and figure out an action plan for those. Because otherwise you're gonna struggle. Like, and it's okay to take care of yourself. Just because somebody didn't take care of you and your emotions in the past doesn't mean that you're not worthy of it and you should just lay there and freeze, you know? And that's a deep cut. And the thing is, it's so hard for some people to get to that point. And you're right, we have a mental health crisis and it makes me so sad.
What makes you sad about it?
It makes me sad because I think about how much I struggled with my emotions when I was in my early 20s and just not knowing what was going on, but I was in the thick of it. Like the despair, the immense pain, the fear, the everything. And I'm not like that anymore. And I mean, of course, there's still pangs of it, right? Like that's how I grew up. But I feel so sad for my past self. And when I think about other people like not being able to identify those emotions and climb through them and get to the other side because it's so beautiful on the other side, it makes me sad. I think I'm sad for my former self too, because that girl was going through it. She was getting it, and she was putting herself in bad situations all because she thought she deserved it. And there's so many people that walk the earth that feel that way, and they don't deserve it. Everyone deserves to be treated well.
Do you feel comfortable sharing a little bit more about 20-year-old you and how she wound up in situations?
Oh my gosh, probably a lot of drinking, a lot of drinking to like numb it away, or like numb away social anxiety. That was the thing. I think also being angry and like not knowing what I was angry about. I told you this briefly that like I won't get into like the specific thing, but giving you a little like backstory on me. A couple years ago, about 5 years ago, I had a therapist where I'm talking to this guy, and also this guy ended up being mad weird because he eventually closed down his practice and he opened up a modeling agency inside of the practice. And yeah. And so the guy ended up being really weird. Didn't love him. And sometimes you have a crappy therapist, okay? You know what? Can I ask your chat a question? One in the chat if you've ever had a not great therapist before. I think it's important to understand that that's a common experience and that's not the bulk of therapy, right? But so this guy, there it is. There's the ones. So this guy, he told me at one point, he was like, "It sounds like you have PTSD." And he just said it like that. And I was like, "No, I don't." Like I said earlier, that's for war veterans. That's not for me. I didn't accept this diagnosis, you know? And I went on, eventually went to like another therapist, and I just did talk therapy with her. And in retrospect, it was a lady that I went through insurance. It was $20 per visit. Real nice lady. Felt nice to talk about my day. Didn't get much out of it. I'm sure a lot of you guys have also had therapists like that too, right? And then I get to like the next lady, okay? And I, accepted that I had PTSD. We started working through that with a lot of tools, a lot of reparenting your inner child, some EMDR, da 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 da. And then one fucking day, okay, Dr. K, for lack of a better term, I had a dark night of the soul with a friend. I'll call it that. And I really had connected with her, and I did the thing where I said something about like trauma dumping. And I randomly told her about a story that just, I don't know, I just randomly told it. And then she said to me like, "That's really fucked up." And it slowly started to uncover this horrifying, to say the very least, memory that has defined my entire life. And my brain as a child could not process that this happened to me. And so it locked it away in a little tiny box because 8-year-old me couldn't handle that. And I realized how horrible this thing was. And this was about maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And I started to comb through it. And I just think this is really interesting to share. And what happens with repressed memories like that, or at least what happened for me, was after this really terrible thing happened, and I'm a child, about an hour later, something else really, really bad happened. And so I took but it wasn't quite as bad, but I took all of the emotion from the major event and I chalked it up to it must have been this other thing. And for many, many years, I felt like this thing that had happened was so much worse than it was, and I could never pinpoint it. But it's because of what had happened prior. And so after I uncovered that memory, and I started working through that with a therapist, through EMDR, redoing the memory, having it uncharged, I realized what I was really mad about and what I was really so upset about my entire fucking life. Like my entire life, I was waking up in this room and reacting to this emotion whenever I would feel little pangs, because what PTSD does is you think that it takes you into a flashback of a memory, but it takes you back into the emotions of that memory. So I would have random times through my day where there would be, because I had multiple triggers around this memory, maybe 4 or 5. So if one of those would happen, I would have all of the intensity of everything that I felt like that day happen all over again. And I didn't know why. I was just reacting to that emotion all over again. And it was crazy. And so I say all of this to say the major thing that has changed my entire life is figuring out how that memory has defined my life. I believe that everyone has a major inciting trauma, whether it's the death of a parent, whether it could be an assault, it could be a bad relationship with a parent that causes severe CPTSD. But you have to figure out what your major defining, inciting thing is and stop living through that narrative and treat it and release that anger, release that fear, release all of those emotions. Because otherwise, it's almost like your brain is trying to remind you of the memory constantly in random ways because it hasn't forgotten. What's your take on that?
Oh, I love everything that you have to say. Can I just think for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So let's understand a couple of things. I think I don't disagree with a single thing you said. I'm just going to try to put it together in a slightly different way. So first of all, I'm with you 100% that a lot of people don't realize that trauma is not specific to even a single event. right? So if we think about the war veteran, we think something really bad has to happen to you in order for you to be traumatized. And that's true, but it doesn't have to be a single event. It can be something like a relationship that's built over time. Other thing, just simple statistic. 36% of the population has not had something called an adverse childhood experience. So if we take a step back, there was recently a study that suggested that depression is not caused by a serotonin imbalance. There isn't a neurochemical imbalance that causes something like a mood disorder. So then the question becomes, okay, what causes things like chronic depression? And it turns out that chances are it's something like these adverse childhood experiences, which over 60% of the population has had. So first thing to understand is that this bad stuff is way more common. We're talking 2/3 of people have experienced it. And I think they go through similar things that you went through where you denied your trauma, right? You were like, oh, like it's not that bad. Other people have it worse. I'm not a war veteran. Therefore, I can't be traumatized.
Other people have it worse is the worst thing that anyone can say to us and anything we can say to ourselves. It's the worst.
Yeah. And so then I think you also said it really well that when you get triggered, it's really confusing for people because people assume that the trigger is an event that matches the prior event. But really the experience of a trigger doesn't have to be a flashback. That's what we saw with war veterans. What you're really re-triggering, I love the way that you said it, is the emotional experience. So the experience for a lot of people with trauma is that they go through life getting these like random emotional experiences injected into benign and normal circumstances.
Yes. And then I was going to say, and then what ends up happening is you have this really emotional person, and then the person on the other end is scared of you or like thinks that you're being too much. I always try to talk about the too much wound. We could talk about that after this or something, but they make you feel like you're too much. And so then the person like represses everything, and then they deny themselves even more because the person that they're talking to in that current moment, they don't realize the person's somewhere else. And it makes me so sad.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah. So I'm going to kind of go back to this why we repeat things. So then what happens is you're carrying around all this emotion. You've got to fix it, right? So like let's understand the brain for a second. And the brain has this function called counterfactual thinking, which is one of the most important functions that we have. When we make a mistake, our brain is able to go back in time and think to ourselves, okay, what could we have done differently so that we did not make this mistake? If our brain did not have this capacity, human beings would not be where we are today. So we can like hypothesize and fix problems so we don't do them again. Right. So now what we got to think about is, okay, the more traumatic the experience is, the more important it is for us to learn how to not have that happen again. We need to make sure for survival reasons that we can fix this problem. And so how does the brain assure itself that we can fix this if it comes around a second time? We just keep on recreating it, right? That's what we do because this is the most important thing. So, okay, like I'll give you just a simple example. I was abandoned. It is a bad idea to be abandoned. It was very painful, fucked me up. We got to make sure that we're not going to get abandoned again. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to find the person who is the most likely to abandon us.
Yes.
And if we can conquer them, if we can figure out this perfect situation where they will never abandon us.
That's right.
Then we don't have to fear abandonment anymore.
That's right.
Because
we can fix it once and for all, they stay, and we use everything we've learned.
If I can climb Mount Everest, I never have to worry about climbing another mountain. So what I'm going to do is instead of climbing these 4,000 foot hills, I'm going to find Everest after Everest after Everest. And if I can climb them, then I don't have to worry about anything. And so there's this bundle of random emotions. There's this bundle of like deep in your mind. The whole point is you also mentioned how memories are repressed. So it's really confusing to the person who's living through this because all this circuitry is working in your brain without your knowledge. There's random ass emotions, random ass suppression, and just repetition of the same behaviors over and over, and people just feel so out of control.
And also, but to an extent, they kind of feel good because this person is familiar to them. But I always talk about, we have to decide, is this person good familiar or are they bad familiar? Often we're very attracted to the bad familiar because we want to redo it. But we feel safe because, and I'm going to put it bluntly, it's like this person neglected me almost like my mom did. This person gaslit me almost the way my dad did. And it feels like you deserve it, so you continue it even though it hurts. And it also feels comfortable and it feels familiar. You're not, and these are the same people that are uncomfortable with someone saying I love you or hugging you because they never got that. So they don't know how to process it. Can I say a little something about abandonment issues?
Yeah,
My
sure.
favorite. Okay, wait, can I ask your chat a question again?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, sorry, Dr. K. Okay, okay, one in the chat if you have abandonment issues, two in the if you don't. I want to see the twos because I have a feeling that we'll have an overwhelming number of ones, and I think this is like a real, almost so many people do. But it's like the real question is, do you have the hypervigilance of the abandonment issues where you're self-sabotaging beforehand to avoid it, right? One thing that I had to learn, and I kind of talked about this before, is I was terrified of abandonment because it happened over and over and over again, and it hurt more every time. And every time it said to me, I'm not worth it. I'm not, just so many different things, right? There's a lot of things that we tell ourselves. When I identify a situation where I'm being abandoned, because often it's easier to identify that they've left before the feeling, like they both kind of come at once and it's really intense and we just want to shut it down and get away. Sometimes take the power back, leave first. What I kind of have to do is, once again, I would take that deep breath and I would say, this is abandonment. And I let it flow through my body. And like, even now I can feel it, like it's in my chest, it's somewhere here in my stomach. And when you let yourself feel it, it goes through your shoulders and it goes all through your body and just kind of down to your stomach. And what happens is when we kind of start to feel it here, we want to push it away. We want it to stop. And we try to stop it anyway, but if you let it flow through you and you just take deep breaths and you tell yourself like, this is abandonment, and you sit in the feeling, that's really what you have to do, because you have to learn to be fearless about the things that hurt you. And you have to accept that they're part of the human experience, and you just have to let it be and be comfortable with every emotion that scares you, because otherwise you'll live your life reacting to them. And that gets you in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but Boze, I want to run away from it, right? Isn't running away from bad things good?
Well, so there's a couple layers in decision making, right? There's the inciting event, then there's the emotion you feel, and then the emotion actually tells you what decision you want to make. And so if you can't work through the emotion, you're not able to get to the decision part. So you end up missing a lot of opportunities in life in doing things or having connections with people or going after things that you want, because the emotion is so overwhelming, you push it away. And so you have to ask yourself, if you really want to, it sounds corny, but live the life you want, because otherwise, if you're constantly reacting to the emotions, you'll never make the decision. And you have to feel the emotion to make the right decision, because you know what you want. Does that make sense, Dr. K?
It makes perfect sense. I think it's...
I always feel like I'm just like a woman in a box rambling. And that's... What?
If you feel like you're a woman, how are you feeling right now?
Okay. Well, you know what? I mentioned the too much wound. I can go on a rant about that.
No. Don't stop going on rants. Why the fuck do you keep on invalidating the value that you bring to this conversation?
Because
I'm a woman rambling in a box. You're not a woman rambling in a box. You're spitting truth. Seriously.
It's funny. It's funny you say that. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Right.
Um, yeah, I have the too much wound where I don't know if anyone else has ever felt like they're doing too much, they're saying too much, they're being too much, they're thinking too much. Um, I've had that for a very long time, and clearly I still struggle with it a bit. And I think that comes from, like having, once again, a parent. All this shit is our parents, like really, and or the people that raise you or whatever. Um, I would like talk or I would be myself. And, if you have like a very tired mother and they can't handle it right now, they go away. Da 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 da. And it makes you think like, I need to be calm and I need to repress myself if I want to be in the presence of others. And yeah, I definitely have that. And I hope you guys, if anyone else has that wound, you should know that you're not too much as a person. You're definitely not too much. Just that person couldn't handle it and they kind of set the narrative, and you should know you are like you're I always tell people that have that, like, I can't get enough of you. I love it and I want more. Like, you're not too much. But yeah, I have that and I still work through it and it's difficult.
I'm detecting a lot of happiness from you right now.
I'm happy that I don't think about myself that way as much anymore, because it was, I didn't deserve that. And I was very hard on myself.
Yeah, I think the wound of too much comes from, and I love the way that you name these, by the way. These are great. I can do a lecture on each and every one of these. But the wound of too much, I think, comes from when children are taught to be small.
Children are to be seen and not heard.
You're right. So you need to be, and there's like you said, there's too much of you. So like, what are you? You're supposed to be smaller. You're supposed to be like, in a box. And now, Boze, you're smiling and laughing and talking, and that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be listening.
Yeah.
And I seriously, I think that there's yeah, I mean, just so much about what you're saying sounds like wisdom. You're wise.
Listen, I'm better, Dr. K, but I'm not good. I'm not mentally well enough to accept that. Like, I still.
Yeah. So see, I mean, I hate to break it to you, but you're kind of digging yourself into a hole here, Boze, because look at how well you articulated your insecurities, and you're saying, hey, like, I'm not ready to accept that I have gained wisdom. And like that in and of itself is like, do you see? You're like, you're not just reflexively pushing it away. You're owning your inability to accept it.
Yeah, I would like to. Listen, Dr. K, I think I also have a wound where I felt like I wasn't allowed to be confident, and I fear confidence. I think that's a thing too. But I will, thank you. Thank you.
What do you fear about confidence? What's scary about confidence?
That's interesting. The feeling is almost, the fear is almost similar to abandonment, where I fear if I'm too confident, then someone will knock me down. And when people try to knock you down, they knock you down hard, real hard, and they try to make sure that you don't get back up. And that's scary. I'm, of course, all the trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze. I have a collapse and submit response. And so when I'm being hurt too much, I get down on the floor and I stay there. I play dead.
That's it's unfortunate but very true that how do I respond to that? Can I think for a second?
Absolutely. I love when you think.
I mean, so I guess we can start with, the idea of collapsing is actually a survival mechanism, right? So when someone is trying to knock you down, if you stand up, they're going to try, as you said, harder, right? Because getting knocked down hurts. So what is the one thing you can do to minimize the pain of someone trying to put you in your place? Is to go there on your own. You're
Yeah,
trying to knock me down. I'm just going to lay down on the floor.
I was just laid out.
Right? So I'm going to knock myself down, because at least when I'm knocking myself down, I can control the fall. I'm still in control of it. I wrest back some control. You can't hurt me if I hurt myself.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so,
This is still a trait that I work through. I believe that we all have tools growing up that get us to a point, and slowly through life we trade out our old rusty tools for new ones. And we get the new ones, we put them in our toolkit, but then we slowly have to learn when to use them and like when to pull them out. And the collapse and submit has been my response since childhood, because it was like, if you resist, we will persist. And so I had to do that. But what I find now as an adult, all through my 20s, and I'm 31 now, I learned that I was missing opportunities to gain respect and to stand up for myself because I was collapsing and submitting all too often. And so now I'm really working through those emotions so I can learn when to stand up for myself, when to advocate for myself, and when to let things pass. And I do this by always asking, let me use this emotion that I'm feeling in this scenario to tell me what I want, and then I will try to make that happen. I don't know if this makes sense.
there. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Does it help when I say it makes a lot of sense?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Okay.
Very validating. I appreciate you.
Really it does. So the one thing that I would sort of shift around a little bit, I love your tool belt analogy. And, but I think, so one of my supervisors once told me that the process of growing up is the process of discarding what works. So in my experience working with people, you're saying, okay, we're tossing out this rusty tool for a shiny new one. I would actually say it's the other way around. We have a very well-functioning, well-oiled, lubricated tool that is at the top of the line of peak efficiency. And we have to get rid of it for something that's rusty and deconditioned. So the collapse response, getting rid of that is hard. You're not upgrading. You're actually, the process of growing up is downgrading, because now you have to learn something that you don't know how to use. And the efficiency of your upgrade tool is actually really inefficient. And so it's really bizarre, but I think that's why it's so hard to overcome these things. Not because they're non-functional, the exact opposite. They're very functional. That's why people keep fucking drinking and getting high if they feel socially anxious, because it works really well, not because it works poorly.
I love your analogy of saying that they're actually shiny, wonderful tools, because when I think about it, like back in the day, well, right now, the collapse and submit tool, it's at the top of the hierarchy. The handle is clean, it's smooth, it's even well-defined, it fits perfectly in my hand. The blade is shiny, it's sharp, like it's so beautiful. That's the way that alcohol and cigarettes used to look. So yeah, it's like, why not grab the secret weapon that solves all, right? And it's hard. It's hard to put her down. And then when you stop using it as much, it does get rusty and it does get old.
Yeah, and that's what we want, right? So as we start using new tools, so I've noticed that you've developed a really good, shiny articulation of your internal emotional state and body awareness of how emotions affect your physiology, which is also great, because part of the reason that emotions are so overwhelming is they exist in the mind and the body, but in the West, we try to handle them exclusively with the mind. And so what we're actually doing is we're trying to conquer these emotions with one hand tied behind our back, because we're working fully in the mental realm.
It blows my mind. One of the best forms of therapy I had was, what is it, the somatic kind of body therapy
Somatic
thing?
experiencing or tapping or EFT or whatever.
I couldn't believe how much, remember when I said I would go back to like the memory and the feeling and all that? My body posture would go back to the way that I felt there, making myself small. It would be in my shoulders. And I had to consciously, when I felt that emotion, oh my God, and it's hard to release the shoulders and feel like I deserve to release the shoulders and let myself be open and vulnerable. My God, was it hard? It was disgusting. I was screaming the whole way through, like just thinking like, just to release my shoulders. when I'm feeling that emotion. So when you start to train your body to do the opposite of what it's been syncing with your brain for so long, that's actually the first step to releasing a lot of those emotions. Actually, I forgot about that. But that one's so complicated, dude. That you need a specialist for that.
Well, oh, you mean about the emotional freeing stuff?
Like
Somatic experiences?
somatically,
Yeah.
like letting it out of your body. There's a lot of it, and there's a lot of people that have survived like assault that don't realize how that's affected your posture and the way you hold yourself and how you carry that, and how those postures are connected to the brain constantly. And when your body goes into that state, your mind goes into that state too. I think that that's a great therapy for like assault survivors, but it pisses me off that so often we send them to a therapist that's on the insurance plan that's just going to talk to them and not do any EMDR, no somatic work, no nothing, dude. Oh,
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about what you found to be helpful and in what ways you found it to be helpful? Because it sounds like you've tried a lot of different stuff. So can we just talk about those?
absolutely. So a lot of you guys have probably experienced when you decide to finally get help, you go through your insurance and you pay $20 per appointment and you start talking to somebody and it's not really for you. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know what you think, Dr. K, but a lot of times I think some of those people just aren't paid enough to, deal with a large roster of people that have a lot of big issues. And then once again, that person is left feeling like they're not helpable, like the person doesn't care. And it's tough. But then we have this other tier of specialists. And unfortunately, the worst part is they cost more money. They just do. Some of them don't take insurance. Some do, but you really have to dig for them. But when you get to these people, we now have trauma specialists. We have specialists that deal with like identity, LGBTQ issues. We have specialists that deal with OCD, totally different beasts. We have specialists that deal with depression. All of these things are treated with different things like sorry, there's so many different things. I apologize. Do you recall what the treatment for OCD is? It's like ORD or something. Sorry, let me investigate this. Oh, it's ERP. It's exposure and response prevention. So they expose them to the OCD thing and, try to control the responses. This is a totally different thing than just talking to somebody about their day. And for somebody that's tortured by cycling OCD thoughts, you really have to put a stop to that cycle. And it's a different type of therapy. Then we get to people that have severe trauma with emotionally charged memories. There's EMDR, where you can replay the memory and charge it down, and finally also be validated for those types of things. You have, oh my gosh, like you have identity issues where people need to, go back to what the world told them and figure out for themselves like who they are. And there's specialists that deal with each part of these areas. And I feel like nobody talks about finding them or like seeking out something specific for what you're dealing with. Or, oh my God, even something like grief. Like as a child, losing a parent, losing both parents, and then not having a parent that can give you the tools to work through that. Like, so all four of these things I'm talking about are completely different than the $20 talking therapist. And we need specialized help for everybody.
Do you have questions for me?
I was just thinking that. I was literally just going to ask if I'm allowed to ask you questions.
Yeah, of course.
Man. Dude, is there a particular wound that you see most often in like gamers? Like, is there a connecting force between us? Like there's probably like the too much one probably isn't here. Is it like the confidence? Is it the social anxiety? Is it the,
So I think that if we look at gaming, there are, so not all gamers are the same. I know it's insane.
I know.
But there's a difference. I mean, there's good research into even showing that the kind of person who plays an FPS is different from the kind of person who plays a MOBA. It's different from someone who plays Stardew Valley. They're different personalities. One thing I would say is really common amongst gamers, though, is something that I would call the logical red herring, which is why they fail in therapy. So sometimes if gamers go to therapy, what they kind of discover, that they'll do something that kind of like what you did. So gamers will go in, they'll have some traumatic event, and then they'll have some other event that they have logically deduced is the source of their problems. And so they'll come into therapy and they'll say, this is my problem. And they'll talk about it and talk about it and talk about it, and you don't ever get anywhere.
You don't get to the big boulder that was behind.
Exactly. So like what ends up happening is they're like misdirecting. It's like some kind of illusion magic where like I'm going to take my repression and I'm going to like make it a problem. And this is what determines my life. Oh, I like this happened or this happened. And so we end up getting stuck because they keep on pointing all of the therapeutic energy at the wrong thing. And the reason they do that is because this hurts. And I don't want anyone to know about this. So instead, what I'm going to do is construct a narrative, because I'm so fucking smart, that fits what people go to therapy for. And so you end up with this. It's really interesting. But when I work with a lot of gamers, it sounds scripted. It's like fucking NPC dialogue level, like same thing over and over. Yeah, I'm so tired. I'm so depressed. I can't get out of bed. I'm a gifted kid, you know, like this. And like,
there's that thing.
And then it's like the same thing over and over and over again. And it's all like this veil of bullshit. And there's something else that is actually bothering them. But the problem is that they're so smart, and sometimes the therapists love it. So I once had a patient who was seen by like 4 or 5 therapists. And the person had this act of being a repressed homosexual. He was a really manly man. And then all these therapists were like, oh my God, he's just gay on the inside. And that's the source of all of his problems. It was all bullshit. He was just playing them like a fiddle. Like he was just like, and as long as they kept on focusing on that, the dude never made progress. He wasn't even gay.
What was the thing? Did he ever? Oh, you probably can't say.
But it was like, it was a lot more bread and butter. It was like a lot more like, hey, I just don't feel good about the person that I am. So I have to pretend to be something else. And what I pretend to be, which is a repressed homosexual, is something that all my therapists love. Right? And so then now going back to this idea of like being a somebody, because like plain old straight me ain't interesting enough for the rest of the world.
Or they feel like their problems aren't valid, you know? They feel like nobody's going to think this is a big issue.
Right.
Because it was so normal in their life. I always go back to parents because this is like the easiest thing to go back to. But it was so normal for your parents to argue or for you to get treated like shit or to be treated like you don't matter that you've normalized it and you don't think it's a big deal. And then you find out other people didn't have that experience and you're like, well, wait, but then you compare your problems to other people's. I always say, though, that it matters how that problem affected you. Like, if it was a 9 or a 10 in your world, that's your 9 or 10. You don't need to compare your 9 or 10 to somebody else's 10. A 10 is a damn 10, you know? So if it hurt, it hurt. And you're allowed to hurt, dog.
No, so, I mean, that's exactly, I've seen this with gamers, and this is kind of what happens, right? Is I have a problem that I don't think deserves a 10. So instead, what I'm going to do is construct a problem that is worth a 10. And then what we're going to do is we're going to try to fix that problem because there's no way that my life should be so fucked up by this little thing that I was unable to do. And then everyone tries to end up fixing a fake problem that feels like a 10. And so instead, what you really got to do is get beneath all of that and start to realize, hey, there's something else which is a lot more mundane, which is something that you don't even think is a problem because it's something you should be able to do or should be able to fix.
Yeah.
And, and so that's like, it's like this big red herring thing that I see all the time. Because the problem is they're so smart, they do their research. And this isn't just gamers. It's like everyone nowadays. It's like kids of the information age are coming in with like, you know, all of this information. And sometimes that can be really good. Like, it's awesome to have patients who are very educated and can do half the work for me. But sometimes they're also really wrong.
Yeah, pulling stuff from social media. And
I mean, and this is, and the reason for that is because if you think about, like, how does mental health content succeed? By being widely relatable. And so people will say like, these are the 16 signs, or here are the 6 signs of autism. And it's like 6 of those signs are also, they can exist in autism, but they also exist for normal people.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing an over pathologization, if that's a word, of like generally like normal human experience.
And you know what's killing me about it is that then, especially from an early age, a person takes on a certain title and then they make that title part of their identity. Your mental health issue is actually not a part of your, like a full-fledged part of your identity. Like you are so much more than this thing that makes you quirky or emotional or upset or something. And then they just fully pull that into their identity and lean more into that instead of finding out who they are and what they like and what they want to do. It bums me out so much. I've always been, I do accept that I have a PTSD diagnosis, but I always look at the symptoms like almost line by line, and I try to treat the symptoms rather than identifying with the whole shebang and just taking that in, you know? But, you know, sometimes I will say too, at the same time, putting a title to that pain actually alleviates a lot of it too. It's just, I don't think you should go too far with it.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that basically 100%. So what I've seen is that sometimes we go through life and life is hard, and you look around and it's easy for everybody else. And then one day you discover, oh crap, there is a whole pile of people who actually struggle in exactly the same way that I do. And there's a word for it. Holy crap, it can be eye-opening.
Yes.
I see this the most often with diagnoses like ADHD and autism spectrum, where it's like, other people just know how to empathize. I don't know how to do that. When I go into social situations, it's like a puzzle that has to be solved. If they move this chess piece over here, I have to move this chess piece over here. It becomes so burdensome because I can't feel it. So sometimes it can be absolutely liberating to understand, oh, okay, like I'm not neurotypical. But I also see the exact thing that you're kind of talking about, where I see this a lot with teenagers, especially who have gender identity or sexuality issues, where they don't quite know who they are. And so then what they do is, if I don't know who I am, I go and look for some kind of compass. So I will go and adopt a label. And I say, okay, like it looks like these people are, you know, let's say that I don't have a whole lot of sexual feelings. Then I discover, okay, there's this thing called the ace community or asexual. And then you decide, okay, like this seems like it fits me. And just like you said, they take that ace identity and then they make it a part of themselves. And then instead of the label fitting them, then they start to mold themselves to fit the label.
Right. I get what you mean. I super get what you mean.
And then they start defining aspects of their character or their personality based on this label. And the real tragedy there is that I think the whole point of a lot of this gender exploration, sexuality exploration, is that labels have led a lot of people to the wrong place. And what I tend to find is that...
And also with that sense of community, you feel like you have to go all in on it and you can't walk back from it too.
Yeah,
and
I mean...
it can be any community.
I've seen so much... anyway, I don't want to go into it, but... And so then I think ultimately what happens is sometimes then people like shoot themselves in the foot. Like, we're having people who hit puberty a little bit late, now identifying as ace because by the time they're 13, they just haven't hit puberty. So like developmentally, hormonally, they're like a 10-year-old. But now that I've become ace, now this is something that defines me. And then it's hard to maintain that fluidity. So I really found that the best thing to do is like, if something feels right, go for it. But you don't have to let that thing define you. The whole point of this whole exploration, at least in my opinion, this is a cis-het male. Okay, so maybe it's not as valid, but is that the whole point is that you don't have to, like, we've done so much damage with labels, and you just be you. And you don't have to own what other people with that label own. You're allowed to play Hogwarts Legacy, even if you're trans.
Here's a thought. So I've thought about this before, but I haven't fleshed it out too hard. I think that there's people that there's bigger groups, but let's say there's 2 types of people just for the sake of this conversation. People that grew up hyper independent and without a community and a commune, like they're just complete loners that are always by themselves. They tend to develop this extreme, like very personal identity. They're usually very much themselves because they spend a lot of time alone. But then we have these people that are more social. Maybe they grew up in a big family. Maybe they were part of a church. They were always part of band group, something like that. So some people feel a lot better being in a community, especially one that fits pretty well, right? And so if you're one of those people that's hyper independent, I feel like you should know that. Or if you're someone that feels better having a coven, you know, you should know that too. And I think that's, I don't know if that makes sense. Okay, I did it again.
No, I think it makes sense. I just loved your use of the word coven.
I am a covenless person. I've always been that way, but I am not upset when I meet people that prefer to be in a coven, you know?
Yeah.
And I realize that difference between ourselves, and I don't knock them for feeling comfortable inside their coven. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, go, do your thing. Love that.
I like covens. I don't know if I'm a coven person, but if I could respawn and pick a different class, I would definitely pick witch.
That's funny.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so you were asking about gamers, and I think the simplest thing is I see this weird red herring shenanigans.
You were gonna, you know what? I would have thought the underlying, or one of the more common ones would have been the addiction aspect, right?
So, yes and no. So I think the thing about gaming addiction, and we may do a stream on addiction on Friday.
Oh my God, can you call me one day for an addiction stream? Because I got some stuff to say about that.
Sure. We did a trauma stream last Friday, and I think it's lovely to have your perspective. But I think the basic problem with games is that they fulfill our psychological needs in a way that is more convenient than reality. Mm-hmm. The problem is that they fulfill them in a less complete way than reality. Mm-hmm. So like we're sort of left with kind of this like zombification of the fulfillment of our desires, where it's not like a full fulfillment. It's like a half kind of fulfillment. So yeah. I can feel good about myself if I make a comeback in League of Legends, but you know, I'm never going to be able to walk into a room and people are like, what do you do? And I'm like, I'm someone who occasionally makes comebacks in League of Legends, and feel good about yourself. You know, like you're dating someone and you meet their family or you meet their friends. They're like, what do you do? And it's like, yeah, I'm someone who occasionally makes comebacks in this particular game. Or occasionally I'm really good at headshotting in CSGO.
I think we also get a little addicted to the confidence that we get from video games because we're not getting it from anywhere else. And
absolutely.
Then we can just ignore the bad games, blame someone else, and then get to the game where we're the star and we're like, yeah, it's so temporary.
It's so easy to blame other people when we play video games, but so easy to blame ourselves in real life.
Oh yeah, it's like when we're playing games, we're just completely different people. We're a version of ourselves that we wish we were, but we're not doing a thing that we really wish we were doing. Absolutely.
It's easy to be the best version of ourselves when playing a game, and the sad thing is it's also easy to be the worst version.
Well, I find that also like with the internet, and it was probably this way more before there were so many people here, but if you're a person that constantly feels powerless in your day-to-day life, you get to go online and create your own little world where you're in control of everything. You click what you want to click on, you do what you want, you talk crap to whoever you want, you get to create the reality that you want in your own little internet world. And it gives people a little sense of power for a period of time that they may not have in their waking life.
So people with trauma are actually very vulnerable to that.
Me.
So this is kind of interesting, but one of the earliest things you learn in trauma is that anger is risky. So insubordination causes potential problems with your survival. So what you see in trauma responses is that people learn to displace their anger into safe environments. This is why kids who are traumatized at school will bully the smallest kid. Kids who are traumatized at home will bully the smallest kid in the class because I have all this anger. What am I supposed to do with it? I can safely express it if I'm picking on a little kid.
Yeah.
Whereas if I get angry at my parents for being mean to me, then I get punished. And so there's one place where I can safely express anger, and there's basically no consequences, which is the internet. So I can rage on the internet all day long. I can rage about all these injustices. I can even rage at people. I can get banned, and I can just make another account. I can get banned from one place. I can go somewhere else. And so I can go on expressing this impotent rage. And when I really stop and think about it, okay, so 60% of people have adverse childhood experiences. You have so many angry people on the internet who aren't doing anything with that anger. What is it? I wonder if it's just this displacement of this classic trauma response.
Truly. And I think some people think that they feel better releasing it, but I think it actually turns into just a bigger rolling ball. I think that activating that angry part of yourself and putting it out there, it actually creates a bigger anger that you almost didn't have before, like a bitterness too.
Absolutely. I think the other problem that we see is that kind of like how you're talking about naming your emotions and owning your emotions. Anger is the most motivating emotion. So if we kind of think about if someone does something bad to me and I feel ashamed of myself, how do I conquer that shame? I use anger. How dare you? I'm going to make sure that this never happens to me again. This person thinks they're better than me. I'm going to show them. And it motivates us. Yeah. And so what do we see right now? We're seeing all of the energy of anger. Curiosity can get you a little bit for a little time, but then it fizzles out. Love can get you pretty far, but this is a challenge because we don't have people that we love today, right? And so instead, there's one emotion that we use to carve out our territory, which we're just displacing on random shit on the internet. And this is why everyone is stuck, because they're not harnessing the anger.
Well, I find, dude, another one of the biggest, like, life-changing, like, therapy kind of things that I had for myself was, I found I would get angry quite often. And what I found was underneath the anger, there was always another emotion. It's never anger. There's always something underneath it. And so when I would feel anger, I would let it flow through me. It sounds so corny, I know, but yeah, like I would let it flow through me and I would try to dig for whatever feeling was underneath that anger. And maybe it was I was attention starved. Maybe it was that I was feeling lonely. Maybe it was that I felt like I didn't matter. Maybe it felt like I was upset. Maybe it felt like I was neglected. Anger is so fascinating because it's really just a shield for our vulnerable emotions. And if you dig deep enough through anger and you find out what's underneath there, you'll find out so much about yourself. Because you're actually probably reacting in a way that you don't want to react. It's just like all you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's good. We talk about that a fair amount. I think it's a big part of also male mental health. It's true of anger in general, but there's this term called normative male alexithymia. So alexithymia is inability to understand your internal emotional state. It's being colorblind to your emotions.
Man.
And the reason we call it normative male alexithymia is because men are culturally shaped to be colorblind to all emotions except for anger.
Wow.
It's the only emotion we're allowed to express. You can't cry, but you're allowed to get pissed off, right? And so what we tend to find is, I'm with you, that we call anger, we do a lot of this kind of work around motivation and stuff in our coaching program, where we work with anger as an umbrella emotion. So it covers other emotions.
Yes. Wow.
So if I'm afraid, when someone breaks up with me, I get pissed, man. I say a lot of, I'm assuming I'm a male here for a second, but in heterosexual. So I'm mad at all these women, right? Women can't be trusted and all this kind of stuff. And there's a whole societal movement there. And really what's kind of underneath that is like, why do you get mad? Well, what other feelings do you have? Well, if this person broke up with me, like, does that mean that other people will break up with me? Does this mean I'm going to be alone? There's fear of loneliness. There's shame. There's feelings of unworthiness. If I was better, would this person not have dumped me? There are all these kinds of feelings, but we don't know. All we know is we know how to get pissed. As long as we're pissed, we don't have to feel any of those things. As long as we're pissed, it's someone else's fault. As long as we're pissed, I don't have to change.
I think The other thing that's so interesting is you mentioned this, like, so we have the anger, we have the breakup, and the breakup brings a lot of things: abandonment, fear, insecurity, da da da. Da. And I don't know what you would call this, but for me personally, when I started working through this stuff, is I would call these complex emotions where you have like four different things working at once. And how are you supposed to get anything done when you're feeling four severe emotions at once? I'm actually curious, like, what does for I'll tell you what I did, but I'm curious what you think somebody does when you're feeling all of these intense things at once.
What they do or what they should do?
What they should do. Or do you want to say what they do first and then what they should do?
I mean, what they do is they get high, they play video games, they watch stuff, they scroll, they doom scroll. That literally, right?
Yeah.
So if we look at social media, if we look at video games, all of these things suppress our limbic system and amygdala. So they literally shut off the circuits of our brain that experience negative emotion.
Yeah.
That's what people do. And that's why they do them. Because going back to our tool belt analogy, this is a really, really good tool, right? It's like I queue up and then I'm not thinking about anything except for how bad my mid player is.
Oh, man.
Now, I mean, what people should do, I mean, I've helped tons of people with this, but I honestly think that
Do you think that's a reaction, the turning everything off is a reaction to something in their childhood? Like that's how they handled it before, just turn everything off, even before they had the video games?
yes and no. So
Okay.
I think what tends to happen, because when you say before they had video games,
Yeah.
there isn't a before video games time period anymore. There's, they're there from day one. It's really scary. I remember like my 2-year-old was better at using even 18-month-old was better at using an electronic device than my mom was.
Oh my God.
But I think that one of the biggest thing that has to change if you want to stop these avoidance behaviors is you need to have a single experience where feeling the emotion does not punish you.
Yes. And we don't seek these.
And that's why therapy is so important. So when I think about all of my patients, so I was a solid like addiction psychiatrist for like 2 or 3 years, where that was the majority of what I was doing. So I worked at 2 rehabs, had, an office and stuff where I did outpatient. And basically for each of these people, the one foundational experience is they have to feel that negative emotion and not be punished for it. And the whole problem is that we live in a society where people punish you for your negative emotions. We have all these postings of Karens losing their shit, right? And that's a person who we love to demonize these people who experience negative emotions.
I demonize Karens all the time.
We all demonize Karens, right? And is that what Karens need? Like, heaven forbid we acknowledge for a moment that maybe Karens need compassion too. But we don't like to do that.
No.
Right? And so a lot of us go through life and we feel like a Karen. Because everywhere I go, people aren't giving me the respect that I deserve. Right? They're not treating me with compassion. No one is sort of considering how I could have a hard day. And then the other problem is that when we experience this kind of stuff, going back to true crime and mass murderers, when we have all of these negative emotions, they come out in some way. And this is why we don't like Karens, right? Because they don't make themselves very likable. Right. They say and do a lot of things that engender the opposite of compassion. Very hard to be compassionate.
There's also that little, I think there's that bit of schadenfreude too for people where they're like, well, I would never do this. So in this moment, I feel better knowing I must not be as bad as I think because this person's so much worse. And it's like we use those people to an extent, people use it to make themselves feel better.
Yeah. And this Karen thing is like, you're right. There's schadenfreude. Because fuck that Karen. Lol. And where does that come from? Because one day when we were emotionally hurting, someone was like, fuck you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
I get it. I get it.
And,
Dr. K, I do a lot of Karen content.
Okay. Well, that's fine. I think that's okay. I don't blame you for that.
I just want you to know. I just want you to know. Because
Karen
otherwise there's an elephant in the room.
It's good shit. Right?
It's okay, but I get where you're coming from. And I mean, even when I'm doing this stuff, I've even said before, like, there's, you know what? There's this person, the formula is this person that doesn't know how to deal with their emotions. I think what most people hate the most is the entitlement aspect of it,
Sure.
because a lot of us that hate ourselves and want to die, we don't have that like entitlement to that extreme. And then now this person, something has made them upset in that day. And then they run into a situation where they feel an opportunity to feel powerful. And then somebody whips out the camera, right? Which also bleeds back into that public humiliation thing. I mean, public shaming will bring somebody out of some bad behavior real fast. And it's crazy, but it's like, are we overusing that? You know?
So I think public shaming will cause, I think it'll bring people out of behavior real fast, or it'll cause them to double down.
Yes, that is true too.
And I think what we see with Karens is that we're selecting. So like we have to remember that we don't see an objective representation of what's out there on the internet. We're selecting for the people who are particularly entitled or narcissistic, which evokes a lot of impotent rage on the part of us, right? Because now we get to be mad at something else, and then we spend all of our days watching Karen content. And we're serious, I'm not trying to throw any shade on you. I think if you like doing Karen content, do Karen content, right? But I mean, I think it's like it speaks to what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Then we end up getting mad at this person instead of getting mad at the people that we should be getting mad at.
And then we have that rolling ball that just keeps on rolling. But also I feel like the other question is too, like when we have this big internet anger ball that we're just making bigger and bigger and bigger, how does that even stop?
I don't think we've seen it stop. We don't know that it does stop.
Yeah, because I think what ends up happening is it only stops when something really, really big stops somebody's ball from pushing. And then they eventually stop and they say, whoa, like that hurt. This stuff isn't supposed to hurt online. Nothing's supposed to hurt. But then they get back up and they make an even bigger ball and it just keeps rolling.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the internet. I think it's like we've created this monster. Everyone's worried about AI. I don't think I think we should be worried about AI, but I think what we're dealing with now is actually way worse than we give it credit for. I think what usually happens, I don't know about you, but sometimes what I literally have to do is just check out of whatever the influence is. Like,
what do you mean?
Just not stop using it. Like, basically.
Yeah, I deleted my Twitter.
Yeah.
Over a year ago.
I think you have to just get off the ride. It's a loop that I don't know where it ends. I don't think it does end. I think you just have to get off.
I agree. I think it's hard for I think one thing that I find is like really interesting is that like other content creators I know, some people I know, they'll read every single comment, like negative comments, good, bad, and my friends that do that, I don't know what they're looking for, like especially when you're reading TikTok comments about yourself and there's like 2,000, 3,000 comments, they'll read every single one. There's like a Tyler Creator tweet where he said, just how are you getting bullied online? Just close your eyes, like walk away from the computer. And like, that's what I do. Like if I'm getting upset or like angry or something with that, I don't engage with it anymore. I just walk away. And it's I feel like it's a more mature collapse and submit, but it's just me saying like, I'm going to go over here.
I don't think it's the collapse and submit. I think it's setting a boundary.
Okay. I like that.
Right, so collapse and submit is letting it, right? So you're subjecting yourself to it. And walking away is like completely different.
Yeah, you're right. There's so much stuff that we can walk away from, but we choose not to. And I think sometimes when I've done that in the past, sometimes it's just because I don't have anything else going on. And I'm just like, yeah, let's fucking do this. Let's hit the gas. I try to distract myself these days.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. Because I think we oftentimes, especially as therapists, we sometimes come up with these super complicated formulations of like, why is this person like, oh my God, it's abandonment issues. And it certainly can be for a lot of people. I'm not trying to devalue that. But I think sometimes I think we just forget, especially as therapists, that just helping someone like build like a pretty decent life is some of the best stuff that you can do. Just helping them find relationships, helping them form relationships, helping them be professionally successful. And it's kind of like, here we are kind of working on all these like negative self-esteem issues, but does this person have a reason to be proud in their life to begin with?
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of chicken or egg. And I think that if you devalue yourself It sabotages your ability to develop things that you can be proud of. Absolutely. But I think it's kind of interesting because if you look at the data, the majority of people who have mental health struggles do better on their own without any kind of professional help. So I want to say that something like, I'm not perfect on these statistics and the studies are not 100%, but something like over 50%, maybe 2/3 of people with addictions actually attain sobriety without ever seeing a medical professional. So the majority of people handle it on their own, or recovery is maybe a better word.
Girl, how? That shit's in my blood. Like, you give me a drink, you're gonna have to give me four. But I'm better now, Dr. K.
Yeah, right. So you're but I'm with you. I'm not saying you shouldn't get mental health support. You should absolutely do that. I'm a big advocate of it. But I think
they must have something in their life that makes it. The thing that made me slow down with my drinking a lot was when I got into a stable relationship. We started creating a secure partnership, which is something I never had before. We have a nice house. I work in the mornings. I've got to be up at 9 or 10 a.m. And I couldn't have that drink. Like, I physically couldn't have that drink because I know I get hangovers in the morning, and I slowly make the choice to choose the good side and not the old ways. And oh my God, it's also so boring because my rowdy girl, she's dying. She is dying. My little troublemaker, I don't know. And it's weird. I feel like a different person, but I'm better now. I'm better, but I'm boring.
How do you feel about that?
I think the biggest struggle with it is that my creative was the rowdy girl. Like, she just had crazy idea, and I talk about this as like almost like a past version of myself. But she just had big ideas, wanted to prove herself. Lots of that anger was, channeled into wanting to prove myself. And sometimes I would drink a lot, and then I'd be hungover for a whole day, and I would be so bored that I would come up with new ideas. Just like a lot of weird stuff like that. But now I need to still do those things, but maintain my good life. And it's at times it's boring now. Things were a lot more funner, a lot more dopamine, a lot more drama. But I don't know if this answers your question. It's just better now, and I prefer this. I'm much happier, and the people around me are much happier too, which means a lot to me.
So I think it sounds like you've crafted a life with a lot of intentionality, which sounds awesome. You were asking me, how do people do it? I mean, it sounds like you just mentioned a lot of reasons why you can become sober I'm sure that, therapy and stuff was a part of it, but I think that's the experience of a lot of people, is that they kind of grow up, right?
Yeah.
Because you just said, well, like, I had to work in the morning. I had a stable relationship. I've got a place to live. Like, these are all things that help me stay sober or have a good relationship with substances.
Interesting, because before, when you said like, most people end up doing that on their own, as much as I had talked to my therapist about, like, I'm drinking or this, that, and the third, her answer was always just like, stop, just stop doing it, and it didn't do much for me. But it wasn't until I decided to. I'm sorry.
What? They just told you to stop and you didn't stop?
And I didn't stop. It was crazy.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and like,
did they tell you to stop more than once? Did they remind you that you should be stopping? Yeah,
it's like she kept saying stop for 2 years, and I'm like, stop what? Like,
okay.
But yeah. So I think what honestly changed for me. Go ahead,
sorry, I can't. I'm gonna let you finish in just a second. And then people wonder, how is it that so many people are able to stop without this awesome contribution from therapy?
Dude,
how is that possible?
Man, dealing with us addicts, I empathize for the family members and the friends, because like they just don't get it. We're like, but it's so good. Yeah, what actually changed things for me was having a period where I had to get up and go to work in the morning, and my life changed like a lot. It really was the life circumstances. And then the big kicker was my boyfriend and I decided to go sober for 3 months. And about a month into it, I also like stopped smoking weed. So for 3 months of my life, I had this intense clarity that I hadn't had before. And I had been muting my emotions for, 7 or 8 years with drugs and alcohol, like weed and alcohol. And I didn't feel them. But when I finally went sober for a while and I came out of it, I realized I was strong enough to deal with everything that I had been running from. And I had to have that 3 months of clarity. And so now I still drink, like I still do, but I'll go through like 2 weeks of sober. I'll go through 2 weeks sober. I'll do a week, or I'll just like, I find it. I still have an issue where like if I drink one night, I'll be like, oh, let's drink the next night. Oh, let's drink the next night. Oh, the next one. Like we're having a good time. And then I'll do a week or two off. And that's what works for me. A little harm reduction. And it's, yeah.
Oh, Boze, I've never met the troublemaker, but I miss her too.
Dude, she was so fun. But yeah, I'm much happier now. I'm much happier.
Good for you, I guess. Living a productive life.
God, what a loser. That's how I feel. Like putting on my makeup, going to like my cool job, and I'm like, God, this is so lame. Let's go day drink. Let's like go out to West Hollywood and get fucked up at 11 a.m. Like that, just see what happens. Those are the good times, like, okay.
No, but I think going back to, so here's what I found with people who become sober, much like yourself, they feel like they've lost a part of themselves. Yeah. But I think honestly, it's back to it's just a rusty tool, right? So accessing creativity is something that you have to work on. But I think generally speaking, the net is absolutely positive. And I don't know that people will ever get back to quite the same type of fun. But I think you can get way closer. So I mean, I've seen this. This has been the hardest actually in the patients that I've worked with, not with substances, but with bipolar disorder. And there's studies. We have a whole video about it on YouTube about it. It's really interesting. But one of the bipolar disorder, probably the people who have bipolar disorder are by definition like objectively more creative than people who don't have bipolar disorder. And when you're in that hypomanic or manic state, your creativity is actually like is objectively higher. Yeah. So you're like channeling all these weird creative ideas. The really tricky thing is if you look at outcomes, people who have untreated bipolar disorder have higher levels of creativity, but their actual output is way lower. So while you may have a bunch of ideas, you can never turn it into something.
Yeah. I have a feeling, I'm sure that those folks also feel very inspired too, or creatively inspired when they're depressed. Maybe not inspired, but they have new creative concepts, but they can't put them into motion.
Absolutely.
And then months pass, because bipolar is usually like a few months, and then they are back into the mania, but they have new ideas. And it's just, yeah.
So I think just as as you continue to stay sober and stuff and do what you're doing, I think the troublemaker.
I'm drinking tonight.
Okay. Whatever.
It's been 8 days.
All right. The week is up. We're on day 8.
She's coming back tonight. Listen, I'm honest. I'm not ready to kill her yet. Okay, we still need her.
I'm not saying you should kill her. It's just, felt like a little bit too much of watching that sand in the hourglass tickle down.
Yeah, we tick it down and then we over.
Hey, it sounds like you're doing well, and everyone's on their own journey. And
truly, yeah.
I mean, a lot of people are able to, and this is also a really common misconception that people assume that sobriety is the only way to be in recovery. There's actually a lot of data coming out that you can actually still continue to use substances. This is the other thing that we're sort of discovering, is that everyone thinks it's like, oh, like you have a genetic thing and your brain is wired differently. But the prevailing theory right now that most addiction professionals will believe or will put forth is that addiction is a consequence of genetic vulnerability plus environment. And so being in the right environment is really an important part.
Personally, I plan to really begin a sobriety journey when I have kids, because drinking was normalized around me, which I think is a huge thing. They were drinking every single day, and sometimes it wouldn't even be. What the thing was with my parents, I didn't see arguments, fights, or anything, I would just constantly see them drinking their wine and then going to bed. So it got normalized to me. But because of a lot of the trauma that I endured, I didn't always handle my alcohol well, you know? But I don't know if you've seen this theme too often. What I realized that was really making me drink so a big part of it was when I was growing up, I was one of those kids that had to like raise themselves. Like I had to take on a lot of adult responsibilities. And when I drink and smoke cigarettes, I get to go to this shitty version of myself that has no responsibilities. And I loved the alleviation. It was like I got to be a piece of shit that was in the bar, smoking cigarettes, taking shots with everybody, and there were no responsibilities. And then the next day when I'm hungover, oh, no responsibilities because I'm hungover. Drinking for me was a break from having to be responsible. And then, I mentioned before that what really changed it for me was having day-to-day responsibilities and just taking ownership that I'm a fucking adult now and I can't have 3 days off of cleaning the house or eating well or doing work. Like, I have to show up, especially at the age I'm in now. What are your thoughts?
No, you don't.
I would like to. Because
So
it's what
I think
I'm good
this is just you're on a journey, Boze. And it's not,
okay.
I'm not trying to be arrogant or condescending here, but
I love this. Give me.
I think, so we have this idea. So okay, let's talk about alcohol for a second, or any kind of drugs, right? So when you use it, you get freedom from your responsibilities, right? So like normally when we go through our day, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. We have responsibilities that weigh on us. I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to do this. And when I drink or get high or whatever, play video games, the things that you have to do don't go away. What really goes away is the pressure on your mind. Okay? So let's think about this. Drinking doesn't actually reduce your responsibilities at all. In fact, it increases your responsibilities because now 2 days later, you have more stuff to do. So first of all, it's not actually fixing anything. It's making things worse, and it's intensifying when you deal with it.
Good shit, Kay. Preach.
Okay?
I need
so
more.
The next thing is, why do we want to intensify the shit that we deal with? Because that's how we function. Because when do we study for the exam? When it's 2 days away and it's too much for me to handle. So our primary motivational drive comes from being overwhelmed.
I perform very well under pressure.
Absolutely.
You put me under pressure,
right? So
and I
now,
will rise.
Boze, you've got a choice, okay?
Yeah.
You can have 3 days of slogging through your shit. Or you can have 1 day of partying, 1 day of hungover, and 1 day of, oh shit, we got to do everything today.
No, don't make me choose. Don't make me choose.
No, I don't need to make you choose. You've chosen. You know what you're going to choose.
All right, I'll take the alcohol.
Okay.
I'll take a drink.
But we're not done. Okay, so here's the wild thing, though. Here's what we all miss. Is that the letting go of mental response? Because remember, the feeling mentally weighed down has nothing to do with actually your responsibilities, because those don't change when you drink. You can actually let go of the feeling of responsibilities every single day.
So it's the gosh, I'm trying to think. The drinking, it's the self-medication. It's just the button you press that makes it easy to turn everything off for the moment. When it sounds like the next best step for me is like, even without the alcohol, to be like, I'm just gonna chill today and figure this out tomorrow. Here's my deadline. I don't have the capacity for it right now, even though I feel stressed. I meditate sometimes. I try, but you know what? It's so boring. I'm going to say it. I do it, but I sit there in the first 2 minutes. I'm like, God, I could be doing anything else. I could be scrolling TikTok right now.
Yeah, no.
Sorry.
No.
We're getting into the thick
boring.
of it. Yeah, but I do.
I'm with you. But I would even say, like, go at your own pace. But this is really when I work with people with addictions, right? So this is like what we discover is that you actually, like, you can be free of those responsibilities. Without the alcohol, you can just be like, and this is where you say, I can't do this today. No, that's not what you need to tell yourself. You need to tell yourself, I can do this today. I have the capacity to do this today. And you know what? I'm not going to. Because I'm just going to take a day for myself.
I think also there's a fun little tool there where knowing yourself, and even knowing myself, I know that I work well under pressure. And so not being afraid that I'm getting down to the deadline and just knowing like, well, it's the same thing. Like I'm taking today off, whether I'm drinking or not, and just relaxing.
Yeah.
And then I know myself and I'm going to get this done because when the pressure hits, like I'm on, you know?
And so what I say, what I think is you just need one experience of, not maybe more than one, but you know, you need like at least one experience where you take a day off for no reason. You just do it. And once your brain realizes, oh, you know what? I don't need the alcohol to take a day off and free my mind of those responsibilities. Then you won't need it anymore. And
Dude, well, you know, but you're also dealing with it. And I want to say again, I am significantly better now. Like I'll take weeks or a few months off of drinking and I love it. I love when I kind of like fall into that. But, you know, also sometimes, you know, we got the day off. It's 10 o'clock. I'm just kidding. I'm not a 10 o'clock drinker, but I'm like, oh, it's 4:59, babe. We'll start walking in the store right now. You know what I mean? Like, but it's fun for me. Like I get like, and then like 2 drinks in, I fucking hate it. I mean, God, I'm sure Chad has this too. Like, how many times have you said I'm never drinking again? I would say I'm somewhere in the hundreds, like 900.
yeah, I mean, I think everyone's on their journey, and I think you're doing great, dude.
Really, thank you. Also, I love how like this started off where you're like, wow, Boze, good job with the trauma stuff. Like, you're doing great. Like, wow, you're wise. And I'm like, can I get a drink? Like, by the end of it.
Yeah, I think it's great. So this is what I'm saying is that I don't think that this speaks any less of you. You haven't become any less wise. This is the whole point is like, if you kind of think about, you know, like, I don't know if you've ever tried DBT, but this whole idea of the dialectic, that two things, we think that, okay, like, oh, like in order for Boze to be wise, like she can't get a drink, like that destroys her credibility. Like, oh my God, like how can this degenerate be wise? Like, oh my God. Like, no, like you get to crush it at some stuff and still be working on the other stuff. That's life.
I think allowing it to be a process too is really important. I would say only in the past, like, man, you know what else too? I would say about like 3 years ago, I was really hard on myself about drinking because I didn't like who I was when I was drinking. And I felt like I was telling all these people around me, I want to quit drinking. I want to stop. I need to quit drinking. I don't like it. And people around me would be like, oh, you're fine. Oh, you don't drink that much. But I didn't like when I was drinking, why I was drinking, and how I felt.
Yeah, I mean, so that's I was going to kind of say the same thing when I say like this is a process. Like I don't want to apply a value judgment to you or for you about what your relationship with alcohol is, right? And if it's been 8 days, whatever, like you get to decide, right? You're saying here I am at the beginning being wise, and then here I am now being a degenerate. No. Right? This could be healthy you. This could be the right balance for you. This doesn't make you inferior at all.
Yeah, and no, it's full circle me, but I like that. I like that. And I like who I am now. Even all the like the dark parts. I think they're fun. I embrace them.
And then I think this is also where, just like you said, I think the next question for you is just, and I think you've already kind of answered it, is, you know, at what point do you want your life to be a little bit different? So right now, like, it's been 8 days, you're good, we're going to have a good time today, it's, you know, whatever, go for it, right? Be safe, obviously. But yeah. But then at some point, you may have to, and this is what I think with just anyone who's trying to make a change in their life, you have to decide, what kind of life do you want? Is the current balance of things what you're looking for, and are you happy with it?
Yeah.
And if the answer to that question is yes, you just keep living your life. Don't let the judgments of other people, whatever. But if you're kind of waking up and you're realizing, hey, I actually don't like being hungover. Hey, like, it is more important to me to be able to work 5 days a week because the value that I derive, the way that I feel about myself and the impact that I'm making in the world, like makes me proud. And that is
Yeah.
more important to me than this.
Yeah. And I think also figuring out like what's best for you too, because so many people will like come to addicts and they'll say like stop drinking, stop doing drugs, stop doing whatever. That person's not going to cut cold turkey because that's their coping mechanism, and if you don't replace that coping mechanism with something, they're just going to like fall apart or they're not going to do it. I think like harm reduction stuff has worked really well for me. It's been a good journey over the past year and a half. And the funnest thing too is that, I make a lot of jokes about it, but you realize that you'll never be that person that you were again because you've learned way too much about yourself. Like, and why you do those things. And you're like, wow, okay, I was doing that because of XYZ. And now that you're aware, you just can't go back to it. But yeah, like now I'll take like a few weeks off or so. I never drink more than like 3 drinks, because that's just my harm reduction limit. Because three
Yeah.
drinks, I'm having a good fucking time. I'm like, but then once we get to 4, I'm hungover. I'm grumpy the next day. The next day I feel depressed for no reason. Like even if I can get up, and I don't like losing days anymore. I hate that. I
Yeah.
can't stand that. Because I'm getting older and it feels like my time. I value my time and I value my days. But yeah, it's so fascinating to me that you are actually right. It really doesn't come from outside help sometimes. It helps from creating the life that you want and then holding on to maintain that because you value it so much.
Holding on. What a good way to put it. I had one other thought, and I don't know how much longer my voice is going to keep up, but damn it, you said something that I thought was so good.
That's very nice of you.
Give me just a second. I don't want to miss it. You were talking about... Oh, yeah. So this I thought is beautiful. So there's this... you said that my days are too valuable to me. So if we talk about, what I see in people who are addicted, and this is true of gamers as well, is that their days are not worth much to them. And it's kind of like a circular trap. So if all I do is play video games all day, what's the value of a day? The value of a day is low.
Mm-hmm.
And so what is the cost of me wasting a day? What can I accomplish in that day anyway? Can't accomplish much. So what's the harm in wasting it? Right? It's like, what's the value of a penny? You can't buy anything for a penny, so you can waste them all day long. And this is the trap that people create. Is since my day is not worth much because I don't do much with it, I can afford to waste it. And I waste it and I waste it and I waste it. And the more days that you waste, the less valuable they become. The less valuable they become, the less it hurts to waste them. And what I'm really seeing from you, and I think you've really put it well, is that a day is worth more to you. And people think that, this is because I'm older and now the sand in the hourglass. No, it's just you've really learned how valuable of a human being you are. And this is where the self-esteem comes in. Because when you learn that you're a valuable person, then your time is worth more. If time is worth more, it is not worth wasting. If it's not worth wasting, then I'm going to live life to the fullest.
Yeah, and try. I think this sounds so silly, but a really big turning point for me, and hard agree with everything you said. And a lot of times people don't think that's possible to ever be able to care about yourself, but it comes on slowly. And when you see it coming, you got to grab it and work on it, work with it, Don't self-destruct, folks. But I think sometime in my 20s, I was watching this show and I saw this thing where they said the most unhappy age, like this decade, is your 40s. Because for a lot of people, that's when all of your life decisions culminate into, like, this is what it is. Your career, whether you've had children or not, whether you're married or not, the way that you deal with your, mental things, the relationships you have with friends, family, like it really starts to solidify at 40. And people see like, this is what I've built. And it gets very difficult to climb your way out of that if you haven't set yourself up. And I'm in my 20s and I'm like, I'm over here having heart palpitations. I'm like, well, this shit sucks now. You're telling me that it gets worse. So I've actually, since I heard that, been working towards fostering relationships, finding a happy like partner, like trying to like care about my job because I'm literally trying to set myself up for 40 so I'm not miserable.
Yeah,
So,
I hear that kind of stuff. I think it maybe used to be true, but I don't think like the midlife crisis is the thing that it used to be. What I see is that people, so there, we have this idea that the 20s or your teenage years are the best years of your life. For like half the population, teenage years and 20s suck. You don't know what the fuck you're doing. People are living life, and like you don't know how to live that life, right? Because you don't fit in. And then like and then what happens is you end up turning 30 one day, and then you're like, well, shit, I just lost the best years of my life. The 20s are supposed to be the best years, and now that's gone. GG. There's no there.
Now the 30s are a banger.
And then some people are like 30s are the time to enjoy. And then some people are like, no, 30s are the worst years of your life because your 20s are gone. I think all this kind of crap is just, it's just a journey.
I think that's true.
I see a lot of people having what I call an early life crisis. It hits way earlier, like 15, 25, 22. The best years of your life are not restricted to a particular age. They're restricted to when you understand what the fuck is going on and you enjoy yourself from day to day and you're kind of living life to the fullest. That can be in the 20s. It can be in your teenage years when you're so clueless about the future. And that's what's changed, by the way. Because in your teenager, when I was a teenager, I was allowed to be clueless. Like the internet didn't exist. And now with the internet, like we don't let kids be clueless anymore. We're like worrying them and making them fucking paranoid from day one. It's like dating is a crisis. Tinder is shit. The environment is going to hell. There's like inflation, COVID, all this kind of stuff. We have a generation of people who've robbed of their teenage years.
No, you're absolutely right. But I would never redo my teenage years because also, like I said, I didn't have any tools then. Like now, at least I have a good armory to deal with a lot of that stuff. When you're a kid, you're just there. And I think everything you're saying is absolutely right. I think when I first heard that, it is a good fear motivator. Like, oh my God, I got to set it up before, 40. But I think in general, choosing to set your life up to live a happy future, like regardless of, fear or a certain age, whatever, I think that's really important. So like I said, like the friends you have, like trying to really forge that connection with them so that they're there when you're in your 30s. Putting yourself out there for relationships if you can. Sometimes we're not ready. Like having good relationships with family members that we do care about, setting up your finances, all that stuff. Like I'm trying finally. Things are good. They're good.
Yeah, I think that's I think it's wonderful, and in a weird way, I think the complete opposite is also true. Where so I know it's kind of weird, but I get that you had the scenic route in life, so it sounds very healthy where you are, but I've also seen the opposite where people are like, okay, I'm setting up for 40. And what they actually end up doing is sacrificing so much during quote unquote the best years of their life. Because you're saying, I don't regret my 20s. Good. But there are a lot of people out there who will sacrifice their 20s for the sake of their 40s.
Oh, no.
And this blows my mind because like I'll work with these kids who are in these like accelerated programs to go to med school. And it's like that way I can finish. I started med school at the age of 28. I was a degenerate in my 20s, and it was great. I loved it. And now it's like it's kind of weird because then they're like, okay, yeah, if I start earlier, right? If I finish all my school at the age of like 24 instead of 28, and then I start, working really hard, and then I start making a lot of money in my like 30s and 40s, and then I can retire early. So it's like, wait a second, bro, let me understand this. You're going to trade 5 years in your 20s for 5 years in your 60s. Does that sound like a good trade to you?
Dedicating your whole the funnest times or what could be just for security at 40 and 50. So lame. I had also, can I just once again reiterate, I had a blast in my 20s. Good times. Never give it up.
Well, you gotta I think I may be done. So you got to let me know if you ever enter a second adolescence, because then we got to hang out sometime. So I get to know the troublemaker.
Yeah, dude, you got it. talking to you.
Likewise.
It's super fun. I enjoyed it. I mean, I knew it was gonna be fun because I know what you do, but like, I'm like, that was great.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, the voice is just given out, and I think, but I really appreciate everything that we shared. I mean, just everything you've shared, Boze. It's like you're just such an amazing human being.
You're an amazing human being.
You don't have to. When I say something nice to you, you don't have to turn it around on me.
I'm supposed to say thank you.
Not just you just sit.
Okay.
And don't say thank you. Say yeah. You know what? I am an amazing human being.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And enjoy. I hope you have fun tonight, or whatever. Whenever. 4:59
I will.
Or whatever.
Little board game night with the homies. We're gonna do our harm reduction 3 drink max, but live it up and enjoy it, and then back to work tomorrow.
And what are you going to be playing today? Do you know?
I don't know. I have no idea. Probably. Have you ever played a game called Coup? So fun. Love that. Some little betrayal games, little one night werewolf, all that jazz with the girls.
Nice. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Super fun.
So thank you so much for coming. Do you want to just tell people where they can catch you?
Oh my God, I completely forgot. So you guys that don't know, I'm Boze. Hello. I do true crime on my channel. It's twitch.tv/BigBossBoze. Listen, it was a joke name back in the day. Anyways.
You've grown into it, dude. You've grown into it.
It's twitch.tv/BigBossBoze. Normally on Mondays, I do true crime content, but I always go on these weird spiels about like trauma and like talking about random mental health things. So yeah, if you guys like Dr. Case, like definitely we'll get along. I will say though, normally I'm live on Mondays at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, but this Monday I'll be gone because I'm going to be in Las Vegas going to the Sick New World concert because I'm a huge new metal and industrial fan. Can't wait. I love Korn. I can't wait to see them. So I'll be gone this Monday, but I also have a YouTube channel. It's bozevstheworld, where you can find some interesting videos. I think if I can suggest one that I think your fans might like, I have this video called Insane Narcissistic Mom Loses It on Son Who Refuses to Go Home, where you see like this hardcore narcissist who's thrown out all these crazy tools to get her son to stay. Pretty interesting. But I talk a lot. So thanks for listening.
Cool.
And
so you're not streaming now, right?
No,
okay.
not today.
So
I'll be back.
Otherwise we would have raided you, but we shall raid someone else. Thank you so much for coming, Boze, and best of luck with everything. And really just love your perspective. I've taken so many notes, and I think we're going to have to turn these into a variety of lectures. I especially love the way that you name these different wounds, because it's like a discrete thing that people can really relate to, and I love it. So thank you so much for coming on today and doing the work that you do and sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with the rest of us, and also being a good role model for like how to progress in life, right? Like it's like, okay, and then you put something together and you stabilize your relationships, and then you don't have to go like swing the pendulum too far, and you can still have like a healthy recovery kind of situation. And harm reduction is a huge evidence-based principle that we're really leaning into a lot. So you don't have to be perfect. You can just be you.
Yeah, and accept you and love every part of you. And because look, if you feel like nobody loves you, the least you can do is love yourself and have fun with it. So that's what I think.
Nice.
Thank you so much for having me on. This was a blast, seriously.
Thank you too. Take care.